Hey there and welcome to Concierge Medicine Radio, your source for actionable advice and real stories of physicians running and growing concierge practices. For more interviews and notes on today's show, please visit conciergemedicineradio.com and enter your email. Now, let's join your host, Taylor Pearson.
Hey there and welcome back to another episode of Concierge Medicine Radio. I'm excited to bring you another interview. This is a show I recorded a few months back with Dr. Camilo Ruiz. Dr. Ruiz runs a internal medicine practice with his wife, Dr. Tiffany Sizemore Ruiz. It's a hybrid practice specializing in sleep medicine and cardiology in South Florida. So they continue to accept insurance for a segment of their patients, as well as see concierge cash-only patients. So in the show today, we talk a little bit about how to set up a hybrid practice with both concierge and insurance-based patients, what a typical day looks like for a physician that's in a hybrid practice, the importance of keeping an eye on and understanding your practice's cash flow, and a prediction for what the medical practice landscape might look like in the next 5 to 10 years. Also want to take the time and thank those of you that have left us a review on iTunes. It really helps get the word out about the show and let other people know if you take the time to leave a review. So we got a great review from Susan MD. She said, practical advice and excellent resource for those of us that would like to explore the option of concierge medicine and how to set up a direct pay practice. So Susan, thank you very much for the review. And if you do enjoy the show, we certainly appreciate it if you'll take a time to go to the iTunes store and leave us a review, as it does help get the word out. Without any further ado, though, let's get to the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Ruiz, why you became a physician initially, how and why you got into concierge practice?
Okay. Again, my name is Dr. Camilo Ruiz. I was born and raised in South Florida. I chose to become a physician. I think, as most doctors, we either have some life-altering experience that leads in that direction, apart from the scientific and the inquisitive nature of medicine in itself, right? Being kind of like a Sherlock Holmes, trying to understand what's going on in the human body. But also there's a personal component with the patient and somewhat spiritual. I decided to go into internal medicine because of that. I think it basically encompasses all those fields that are most interested me, and then ended up specializing in sleep medicine because it has an array of areas that I find personally interesting, which go from the pulmonary to the neurologic and psychiatric. Unfortunately, now medicine is going through many changes, and this is all multifactorial, many of it coming from the government and some of it from the private insurance companies, and a little bit more on the transparency end from the patients. And what's happening now is that we're seeing that the government and the private payers want more accountability on the physician's end, and quality care metrics are being followed. So, unfortunately, the way they're trying to accomplish many of these things are by limiting patient care and by limiting the reimbursement for physicians as well. And so, what happens is as someone that trained here in the United States, you have a certain amount of debt obligation that you have by going into this field. And then when you come out, unfortunately, the debt obligation is fairly large, but the income is not comparable. And so you can be in this catch-22 where you're working, but you're making limited payments to your overall debt. And so what's going to happen, I think, in the next few years, because of all these different changes in the American healthcare landscape, is that you're going to see physicians are going to start to try to avoid the third-party payer and try to have a direct care with the patient, a direct fee per se, and try to collect that way and limit the number of patients that they see, but hopefully increase their revenue by doing so.
You've already made that jump. Was there any specific thing that caused you to make that, or was it just kind of you saw the trends and where things were going and wanted to go ahead and take that step?
I think one thing with concierge medicine, you really have to be in an area where it's feasible. I mean, for the reality is it's somewhat of a niche practice. But again, even though it's niche, I think that it's a viable practice. It's just being in the right location, right? The other thing is, I think it has to be done gradual. You'll hear of some doctors where they've had practices for the last 25, 30 years, and it's a booming, very busy practice, but unfortunately they're tired of seeing the 35 patients a day in order to make ends meet, and so what they do is they basically let all their patients know that they're going to switch over to concierge medicine, and they have a fee involved. And at that point, many of their patients end up leaving, and some of them stay, and then they basically limit their number of patient encounters. And my wife and I have somewhat of a hybrid practice where we still have patients that are fee-for-service and we take their insurance, but we have another set of patients where they really want that high-end quality care where they can have access to us 24/7, whether by phone or email, and just be there for them when they really need us. So again, I think it's a viable business opportunity from a physician standpoint. It's just it does take a little bit of work and a little bit of time and letting it build that way.
One question I know a lot of physicians have is how the day-to-day look compared to a traditional practice. So could you walk us through what a typical day looks like for you?
Typically, my mornings, I'm at the hospital. I round on a fair number of patients in the hospital. Once I'm done with that, I go ahead to my office. And in my office, it's a mixed bag. I can have concierge patients, or I can have fee-for-service patients. Of course, my concierge patients take priority if if they need to be seen immediately. And then I also do sleep medicine, so I have a fair number of patients that come as direct referrals from other practitioners from the area, or that find me on the internet that want to see me for their sleep disorder. So again, it's more of it's a hybrid practice, but again, I do see that the concierge prong tends to grow a little bit each day.
Are you hoping to transition to 100% concierge eventually, or do you?
I think at some point I will. It's just the reality is, I think if you're going to do it from the beginning, and that's one thing that my wife and I talked about when we put together our practices, we wanted to be honest with our patients in the sense that we didn't want to build a practice of regular internal medicine and then 10 years from now, send them a letter saying that we were switching to concierge and then half of the practice leaving. And I don't think that's fair to both to the patient and to ourselves. So we said, we'd rather just let people know that we do offer the services up front and that we do have that practice style, and at some point we will transition 100% to concierge and maintaining a little bit of the sleep and the cardiology, which my wife does.
So you just handled it by being very transparent and honest with everyone on the front end.
Yes, yeah, I think so. I think that's important. I've heard of stories where doctors that they had booming practices, but then decided to go concierge, and some that set them back a little bit for a few years while they built up the concierge model. Because the reality is not everybody is going to be able to afford concierge medicine. Even though I think our annual fee is very competitive as compared to some of the other fees I've heard, especially here in South Florida where I'm at. I've heard of fees going up to $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 a year.
Tell us, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face as part of your hybrid model or part of the concierge aspect of your practice that you weren't dealing with before?
I got to tell you, my real problem is sometimes realizing that not all my patients are concierge, because I really try to treat all my patients well, even if they're not concierge. So my wife sometimes gets upset at me when I take after-hours calls and answering questions or, need to be. And we have to realize too that that those patients are not paying the fee as some of the other patients are to be able to have that access. So really it's more of a me realizing that not everybody is concierge, but for the most part, the concierge patients really take care of themselves. I mean, they're realistic in regards to when to contact you. They're not going to wake you up at 2 a.m. unless it's really important. Otherwise, they're pretty respectful.
And my dad's a physician, and I can remember my mom saying the same thing with him kind of fielding calls at times when she felt he shouldn't be.
Correct. And that's the problem. The reality is that my concierge patients tend to be a little bit more well off from a socioeconomic standpoint, and they're busy people themselves, and so I think they tend to have an appreciation for the work hours, and they tend to contact you when they really need you. Like for one example, I had one patient that's a concierge patient that contacted me on a previous weekend, and it was my kid's, my wife's baby shower, and but he understood it was an emergency, and he was polite about it, and I took care of him, and he was able to go, and he was appreciative. But the reality is, I don't think I would have done that for my regular patient. It's just not feasible,
What's the hardest or most frustrating part of operating your practice right now?
I think the most frustrating part, probably the billing. And when I say the billing, I'm referring to the billing from the third-party payers. Everything nowadays needs an authorization or a code. They can deny you for anything. You sent it to the wrong address, you sent it with the wrong number, or you're missing a number, or you're missing, a letter and a name. And it's frustrating because you work hard for what you do, and then you try to bill it correctly, but they still deny you. And I think fortunately, it's a game that's been being played by the private payers for a very long time. And unfortunately, physicians are the ones that have to suffer with it, and I don't know if there's anything better out there. Maybe what we're doing with the concierge model, where people pay directly, might be the best option. But then again, there's a lot of ancillary testing. In my field, for example, sleep medicine, a polysomnogram can be expensive, and so I doubt that many patients would pay out of pocket for the sleep study themselves, So it's something to consider.
What's the most rewarding part of your day?
I think the most rewarding part of my day is when I see someone either in the hospital that comes in critically ill, and I'm able to help them back and get on their feet, or a patient in the office that they come in with their wife and they're snoring like heck, and then they can't get any rest, and I get them treated on their CPAP and get them on the right mask, and they feel so happy and refreshed and able to perform their daily activities. Even the concierge patients, So, like I just mentioned, one patient that was sick on the weekend, and I came in, emergently to see him in the office, and he was really appreciative because he knows that if he was in a regular practice, he would have had to wait till Monday, and he would have probably called on Monday, and they would have told him, listen, we don't have any appointments. You have to come on Thursday. So, again, I think it's rewarding. Each day is rewarding, and each patient individually rewards you, and you take care of them.
Do you feel like the concierge aspect of your practice is more rewarding in the sense that you get to spend more time with the patients and you're more attentive, or is it kind of the
100%. If it comes, yes. I think what's been lost in medicine today, and I try to explain this to a lot of the medical students that I teach at the university, medicine is special because physicians are able to establish a bond, a relationship with the patient, and a bond that grows or should grow over time. A lot of the jobs now, and over 50% of physicians that go into practice from graduation, they go into some type of employed practice. And the problem with these employed practices is that you don't own the patient in a sense. The company owns you, and you're just there to see the patient, take care of them, and move them along in whatever you want to call it, their system. But you really don't get to establish that relationship or bond and advocate for that patient. And what I see with concierge is that it's still there. That advocacy is available. You can form that bond. You can keep that patient with you for the next 20 years. And grow old together in a sense, and I think that's beautiful. I think that's what medicine was and should continue to be. And unfortunately, because of all the attacks from all different sides that medicine has had, that doctor-patient relationship has suffered significantly.
When you transitioned to the hybrid model, did you have a consultant that came in and helped you, or how did you manage to make that transition?
No, we looked at different, on the internet you can get a lot of information on how people set up different types of practices. There's some where basically they just take no insurance whatsoever, and that's direct care approach, which there's many of those up in the Northeast. Down here we did a little bit something different where people pay for the opportunity to be able to reach the physician at any moment via phone, email, and so they pay for that. So when they pay for the concierge fee, they're not really paying for any medical services per se, because by law, when you have a health insurance policy, that's what the health insurance policy is supposed to cover. They're supposed to cover anything that's medically related. But when it comes to service, which really that's what the concierge fee is covering, it's the service, the concierge service, then that's how we kind of get around it. So they pay a fee up front for the service, but they still use their medical insurance to be able to pay for labs and testing or whatever else they need. If you're going to go sit in an office, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and think that you're going to have 30 concierge patients walk up to your door and pay you fee for, just straight cash, no insurance, it's impossible. It's just it's not going to happen. I don't care how good you advertise. I think those type of patients come with time, and you have to be out there practicing for a while. And even the way we do it, when you have the regular fee for service patients, where they'll come and see you and they really like you and they want to keep you and they want to have access to you, then some of them even switch over to the concierge model because they see the benefit.
So you would recommend that physicians kind of make that change gradually then?
Yeah, I think you have to. You have to have something sustaining you while you're making that transition. I don't think that it's feasible to do it all at once, unless you have deep pockets and you can sit in a room in an office for a long time and wait. But then again, you have to be out there in the public eye. If you're not in the public eye, you're never going to get the patients.
So how have you managed to find new patients? Are there any particular ways you found to be effective?
Yeah, I think my wife is very involved with the American Heart Association. I myself am involved with the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, and I do a lot of interviews on TV and radio, so that having my name out there and people listening to my voice, that typically helps them identify me amongst many of the other physicians here in South Florida. And they search you out when they hear good stuff either on the radio or on TV, and things that make sense to them, and they like your character, then they'll come and see you in the office. So it's like kind of you're kind of selling yourself in a sense.
And do you have many patients that find you through your website or online?
100%. Yes, we get a lot of patients that, especially from the Northeast, from Boston and from New York and Philadelphia, that they have their physicians up north, but they spend half the year down in South Florida, and so they need someone to coordinate their care when they're in South Florida. So we take care of them half the year here, and then they go back home and they see their doctor up there.
Do you offer any special or unique services to attract patients? I know I've heard doctors doing kind of free presentations or informational presentations to get people into the practice.
I would recommend that to any physician, not even just a concierge, doctor. I think that's part of being a doctor is to educate, and you should be out in the community serving, even if it is a couple hours a month. People appreciate it. You can establish relationships with people that can grow and even follow you to the office. So I think it's good. And you could talk, from just general topics from high blood pressure to diabetes to other things that are, that affect people like sleep apnea, for example, in my case. So it's good.
From other physicians you've talked to that are either in the process of making a transition into concierge care or have already done so, are there any common mistakes you see?
I don't think this necessarily applies just to concierge medicine, but if you're going to open your own office, you need to understand expenses and how much is going out versus coming in, because that can be the factor that ends up having the business fail. You have to be very aware of what's going on. And just, again, it's math, if you're not producing and you don't have, deep pockets to sustain the office, it could be very troublesome and have a hard time keeping the office open. So it's something to keep in mind.
Are there any major trends you see moving forward, either in your practice, in healthcare in general, in concierge care and technology, and kind of where all these things are moving?
I think here in the United States, the next 10 to 15 years, you're going to have probably a two-tier system. You're going to have people that are willing to pay extra to have that access to physicians, and those that do not have the ability to pay that will unfortunately have to wait very long times to see a physician, or they will probably be taken care of by advanced nurse practitioners or physician assistants, and I think that's something that the government is really trying to push. The mid-level provider and being able to care for the masses. Which I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that they need to make sure that there is a qualified physician supervising the physician assistant or the nurse practitioner to have good outcomes. So that's my only concern.
So what do you think what will that landscape look like from the physician's perspective? Is there going to be kind of this spectrum of concierge-only physicians, a larger group of hybrid physicians, and then the bulk are still going to be in traditional practices, or how do you think that'll shape out?
I don't think concierge is going to be the overwhelming majority of practices. I think it'll still be a very small sliver of medical practices in the United States. I just feel that the way we know medicine today, where you have a lot of private practitioners, is going to dwindle down, and a lot of those either are going to retire, and the young people coming out are going to go for employed positions. And so what happens is, again, patients will suffer because you're going to have long wait times, and maybe not even see a doctor. They're going to see mid-level providers.
Well, if you had only one piece of advice to give to physicians who are considering a transition into either exclusively concierge care or a hybrid model, what would you say to them in terms of making that decision and in terms of making that transition if it's something they want to do?
I think you at least need a year of preparation and thinking on how you're going to set up your model. And then my other piece of advice would be making sure that they know where they're located, where they're at, and making sure that there's a viable patient population for that type of practice. Because the reality is, I think that if you're somewhere in the middle of of the southeast, and then you have a very small population to begin with, I don't know if you're going to have that population that's going to be willing to pay extra money to see you, since they already have difficulty to access to care. So again, just something to keep in mind, where location is very important.
What specific information did you look at where it made sense to you to make that change?
We did it just because we were on this treadmill. You're just seeing so many patients a day, and you start realizing that it's a non-sustainable way of practicing. That at some point you need to start saying, well, listen, I need to be paid a little bit more per encounter, in a sense, in order to be able to sustain the office and be able to live my life. So that way, not only are you providing better care to the patient, but at the same time, you're not killing yourself day in and day out.
When you looked at the local area you're in, what made you feel confident that there was a patient population there that would sustain?
Well, one, there's already concierge practices near us, so that's a plus. And then knowing that there's a significant, I don't want to say I would say, affluent population in South Florida that is searching for these type of physicians. So that made me confident that we would be successful in that manner.
Well, thank you. That's all been great information, Dr. Ruiz. Is there somewhere people can reach you if they have further questions or want to learn more about your practice?
Sure. I mean, they can find us at www.choicephysicianssfl.com.
Hey guys, this is your host, Taylor Pearson. To give you a little background on the show, after seeing my dad and sister, both physicians, struggle to find a good resource for how to transition from their traditional practices, I launched Concierge Medicine Radio to create a resource to help physicians and healthcare professionals launch, run, and grow patient-centered direct pay or concierge practices. If you enjoy the show and want to help us spread the word to other physicians and healthcare professionals, it really helps us out if you'll leave a review on iTunes. I know the iTunes interface is a little clunky to say the least, so we put together a quick guide on how you can leave us a review at conciergemedicineradio.com/review, or you can go to conciergemedicineradio.com and click Spread the Word.
Thanks for joining us today at Concierge Medicine Radio. If you found today's show valuable, we'd love it if you spread the word by leaving us a review on iTunes or sharing it with your friends. To see notes on today's show, please visit us at conciergemedicineradio.com. While you're there, leave us your email to hear about all upcoming episodes.